So welcome to this great conversation that we're going to have today about sleep paralysis. I'll tell you a little bit about Sheila, which is that based in the UK, Sheila is an expert in sleep paralysis and extraordinary spiritual experiences, and in fact is right now in the middle of getting a PhD on this topic. She says that after secretly living with chronic sleep paralysis for over 30 years, she's decided to break her silence about her struggle with the phenomena and the impact it's had on her life. Sheila says that she's passionate about illuminating the overlap between sleep paralysis, spirituality, and science through research and education, and she's since dedicated her life to helping others manage and transcend sleep paralysis and other extraordinary spiritual experiences. And so I and Sheila and I found each other, I think through Instagram. I can't remember exactly how, but I think it was Instagram. And she wrote a wonderful piece on my blog Dream Studies portal a year ago, and it was just we have such a it was just wonderful to hear such high level and deep perspectives on sleep paralysis that we rarely hear. And so, yeah, welcome, Sheila. Welcome to the Dream Portal.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you for having me, and hello to everybody.
Yeah, one of the things about your bio that really struck me was this piece about breaking the silence, right? And it really, for me, highlights that the taboo around this topic. And I've experienced that in my own life. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about how you've experienced that taboo and how does sleep paralysis emerge in your own life?
Where to start? I think that I know that I was working at the time. I've kind of always worked in jobs where they were kind of very kind of office based, very kind of hierarchical. I've had I've had several kind of leadership roles, middle management, senior management type positions. And I just remember starting to going to work feeling really tired and sluggish. It was at the start, it was very hard to pin down what was actually going on, because I would just wake up with this recollection that something had happened whilst I was sleeping that kind of drained me and exhausted me. So I was just going into work feeling really tired, and people would be commenting about my appearance and that I look really tired, or I'm quiet in this meeting and I didn't have much to say. And I never shared with anybody what was happening. I really did keep it to myself. The experiences continued. And then I'm not sure if it was me wanting to understand what was happening more so, or whether they got more intense, but they got very vivid, the experiences that I was having. I can go into detail about the experiences if that would be helpful, Ryan. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I'd love to hear your personal experiences, but maybe before that, could you give us, just from a definitional standpoint, like how do you approach this phenomena? How do you define sleep paralysis and its effects?
So I know for me, when I first had it, I didn't know what it was called. I had to go, in those days, there was no internet. I went to the library, I did a lot of research, and I found this thing called sleep paralysis. And it was, oh my gosh, that's what I'm experiencing. But not only with that, what came for me was a breakthrough in that there's a name for it. Other people are experiencing this as well. It's not just me. And I was able to put a framework around it. And I remember seeing that painting. There's a painting, a Henry Fuseli painting of the lady on her back and this beast on her chest. And I thought, oh my goodness, looks just like me, you know. And that was a bit of a breakthrough time for me, because up until then I thought it was just me having this experience. So it was positive in a way. But through my research, what I've been finding is that there is this thing called sleep paralysis, and it's quite a literal thing. Our bodies go, when we go to sleep, our body paralyzes itself. It's something that happens to everybody. It's part of our defense mechanism. It stops us from acting out our dreams, and so and stops us from getting up and walking around, you know, whilst we're sleeping. So to some extent, everyone has that physical bodily paralysis. But what everyone doesn't have is the experiences during that state. They don't wake up during that state. They don't feel things, see things, and have those experiences that are termed as sleep paralysis. So sleep paralysis has become a bit of a catch-all for this phenomena that is the physical paralysis, as well as the terrifying, I don't want to say hallucinations, but those terrifying experiences. It's a bit of a catch-all word for everything there, Ryan. So someone will say, oh, I had sleep paralysis last night. And then it's not till you dig a bit further that you realize that they just woke up at some point and couldn't move. There was nothing else going on for that person, you know. So there is some untangling that needs to be done in terms of the physical bodily paralysis and the terrifying, scary, frightening, and also transformative, I should say. On the other side of the coin, they can be incredibly empowering and transformative, the experiences that people are having. You know, they're two sides of the same coin, really, in terms of sleep paralysis. But in terms of the more conventional understanding, the terror, I mentioned the picture of the Henry Fuseli image of the beast, the incubus, on the lady's chest. Persons who have sleep paralysis, that's a real thing. I know, I've been there, seen it. I can see it right now. Just there, it's a huge thing, just there on top of me. It just comes wood, thump kind of thumps on down on your chest. So sleep paralysis can come with that. It can come with you get the anxiety, the fear, the terror, the sensing that something is there. You get this foreboding feeling as well, that something is kind of watching you. You may see some kind of entity. And there are different types of entity. And again, through my work, I'm kind of categorizing the entities. There's, of course, the Hat Man. There is the Shadow Man. There's the shadow in the corner. There is also one that I saw recently, which was this Smoke Man. That's the first time I've seen the smoke person, you know, which is interesting. Have you seen the smoke person, Ryan? Have you seen that one?
No, but I'm reminded of Bram Stoker's description of Dracula, which I think was a sleep paralysis encounter, and he describes how Dracula emerges as smoke. That's his exact description.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. And I've heard other people talk about the smoke. It kind of, you can see through it, and then it gets thicker and thicker as the smoke kind of molds into the shape of a person, you know. I just find it really, I shouldn't say interesting, but it's just the fact that the people I speak to, it's the same images, it's the same things that we are all experiencing, you know. And of course, there is the link to extraterrestrials and alien abductions. And I'm sure I could go on for hours, but that's another side to it that we shouldn't overlook and ignore. I'm a champion for saying that it doesn't fit within one area. It it covers the supernatural, it covers mystic stuff, it covers, as I said, the UFO, the ET agenda, it covers shamanism, it covers a whole host of areas. And of course, it does also cover the medical, the neurological, because we can't kind of take out our sleep states and REM and the impact that that has on sleep paralysis as well. So yeah, there's a lot to explore there.
There, I mean, right. I mean, so you just open it up with like, what's sleep paralysis? Oh, it turns out it's all of this, all of these things. And by the way, I'm really, yeah, uncomfortable with the word hallucination too, that is often used. Sometimes the hypnagogic hallucination, because the word devalues the experience from the onset, and which is kind of almost an extension, right, of this "it's just a dream" that we hear all over the dream world. That there's this, that this isn't important, and that it's just your brain. And even with that recent clinical focus on sleep paralysis that has occurred in the last, I'd say, decade or so, there's still a really serious, I would say, reductionism about the power and the transformative power of these experiences, like how they affect our worldview, how they affect, our relationship to the divine, our relationship to, I mean, everything, right? It's so impactful. It's such an impactful experience. And it is a spiritual experience, because, well, there are quote unquote, literally spirits, this isn't myself. It is, I'm looking at something that it's literally made of smoke. So this is spiritual. But it's also spiritual in the fact that it does cause me to question, what's the nature of reality? Who am I in contact with? Is this a projection of myself, or is there something bigger? The collective aspect of this. And so I love the way that you frame it. And I really am interested in how you're cataloging these specific kinds of manifestations of the entity, or the other, or however you want to describe it, because I feel like that's also an aspect that's really been neglected.
I'm really glad that you said what you said about the word hallucination, because it's a sensitive area, I think, in the field, because it's almost as though there are two schools of thought, that either it's an hallucination or it's something spiritual. It kind of feels as though there are those schools, kind of groups that people fall into. And so if you don't believe it's an hallucination, and the hallucination side is the rational side. I mean, if you're a sensible person, it's going to be an hallucinations. And if you're a bit then it's spiritual. So I am so glad you said what you said there about that, Ryan. But in terms of cataloging the experiences, yes, I'm cataloging the types of experiences in terms of the features of the experience. So I am cataloging the types of entities. What do people feel? Someone may feel the bed go down at the side. They may feel someone behind them. They may feel physical sensations on their body, hands on their bodies. The sounds are very interesting, because persons may, there's often a buzzing sound, an electricity kind of static sound, the sound that the TV in the olden days would make, when you've just kind of plugged it in, that sound would be heard, and I kind of call it a calling card. They because it happens just before like something major is going to happen. My word is a sonic cue. That's what I'm writing it up as. There are these sonic cues that happen before the experiences, you know. So I'm cataloging those kind of things in terms of what's being seen. People are, sometimes the entities will transform into persons that they know. So it'd be a family member, mother, father, sister, brother, and they may kind of come suddenly into your face. It seems as though there are some entities who are definitely wanting to invoke fear and terror in you, to make you panic, to make you feel the anxiety, and to make you feel scared. They're very malevolent, and you feel that malevolence around you, you know, when you wake up in that space. But I'm also realizing through the research that I'm doing, and again, I'm researching this, but I'm an experiencer as well. And I know for me, it's been very transformative, and there is a psychic element to it as well.
Huh.
So yeah, so and the psychic element, persons have been speaking to me about that also, and it's very subtle. There are the obvious ones, like, you know, you may get messages, you wake up with messages, you may see things during that state. Persons are seeing numbers, for example, things flashing at them. And then so you wake up with this kind of information. It's almost as though, from a spiritual sense, the other side is using you as a conduit to kind of have this knowledge, this information. There are those things that are happening, but also I'm finding that persons are endowed with certain subtle abilities during the wake state. So it's not just a sleep state experience. So they'll wake up and it's so subtle that you could almost miss it. You know, one person will say, I touched this picture, Sheila. I went to a friend's house and I touched this picture. It was old, you know, and he said he was immediately transported back in time in a fraction of a second, and he felt the emotions and the sadness of the painter. And he took his hand off the painting and was like, wow, what just happened? He couldn't believe it, you know. Another person was at the scene of a car crash. It was a truck and a car. And he said he saw the person on the floor and he saw the person leave their body. He said he saw this kind of shape come out of the body. He saw that, you know. Another person was in hospital. He said he had had a few strokes. He was in hospital and he had been moved to several hospitals. And he said he felt this kind of funny emotion in his stomach. He felt when people were dying. That's what he said. That's the only way he could term it. He felt like people were dying when they were dying, and then the emergency unit would come in, the crash unit would come in and try and revive them, but he said he knew that were already dead, that they had gone already. You know, these are the things that the experience that people are talking to me about in terms of and you would think that this has nothing to do with sleep paralysis,
Right.
but for me, I'm seeing a correlation between the two, and I think that that's prompted. I mean, I've always been a dreamer. People have always come to me and he said, "Oh, did you dream about me last night? Or do you have any messages for me?" I've always been that person, you know, with that. And so for me, I'm wondering if that's again some clue and some correlation with the sleep paralysis experiences, and that there is some kind of psychic awareness ability that's going on, that's connected with the sleep paralysis, that's connected with a range of spiritual experiences that we can tap into during the dream state. I
Yeah.
think that's where that's the journey that it seems to be taking me on in terms of the direction that the research is going.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, that links in with some of the things that David Hufford had talked about in some of his later work. And so David Hufford is the person who really connected and took seriously for the first time as an anthropologist the phenomena of sleep paralysis as with a focus on this the supernatural component, and really did some of the mistakes that nightmare researchers had done in the past with conflating nightmares with sleep paralysis and other problems. And his work is Terror in the Night, 1980 something, 81, 83. And it's such a classic piece. And when he looks into some of these sleep paralysis encounters that he does his field work for, the sufferers are also experiencing poltergeists. They're also experiencing psychic intrusions in waking life, but there's no psychopathology in any of these folks. They're just, I think, what we would say is thin boundaried people, right? And so there's this border thin veil thing that happens with sleep paralysis. Folks tend to also have other kinds of extraordinary experiences too. And so in Hufford's later work, he moves sleep paralysis into this visionary state that has a lot in common with visitation dreams and near-death experiences and um, psychic encounters, and groups them as an anomalous, extraordinary event. And he says, when you take all of these into consideration, you see that most of us have had one kind of extraordinary event in our life. Well, if it's not sleep paralysis, maybe it's a visitation dream. If it's not that, maybe it's this, that thing about the painting or a deja vu experience, that happens in waking life, and we're visited upon. There's something enters the room that was not there previously. Like we have an encounter experience, opens it up to the fact that, wow, this is actually almost common, and we just don't talk about it. We just don't talk about it. How can we, and so, yeah, we have to talk about it. We have to normalize this. And so I'm just wondering if you could raise hands, if you've had a sleep paralysis encounter. I'd love to know if anyone in the room has had a sleep paralysis encounter before. So yeah. Okay. So like, like that's a lot of folks, right? Like just in this room who've had it before. It seems to come with the territory. It comes in the territory of dreams and dreaming. Um, Well, one other thing you said, Sheila, that I'd love to touch upon um, is the positive or the transformative aspects of sleep paralysis, which is another thing that we rarely hear about because it doesn't fit the narrative, right? It doesn't fit the narrative of this is a nightmare and we have to stop these things. Can you explain some of that? What that means for you?
I know that nearly everyone that has had sleep paralysis, it's left them, yeah, it's kind of left a kind of scar to say that, oh, you kind of never forget the experience that you had. But there are also some persons who say, why haven't I had one since? It's almost as though there's some kind of a void. The experience touched them in a certain way, and it's almost as though with the experience came a touch of the infinite, a touch of that universal power, that knowing that there's more going on here than our physical existence. It's that which they have touched, and that's what they would like back in their life in a tangible way. And persons are willing to have the terror, the scary bit, as long as that happens, as long as they continue to have those experiences. They don't mind it with the scary stuff, Persons are seeing it as a gift and a curse. I hear that very often, but they would still rather have the gift. Persons say that they feel special, they feel unique. I've had persons say, Sheila, how can I get sleep paralysis? So, and I know that especially on Reddit, there's a very active group who are trying to induce sleep paralysis so that they can astral project, because I don't know if you've touched on it, Ryan, but sleep paralysis is being used as a tool to have out of body experiences, and they're seeking ways to do that. So it's, how can I have sleep paralysis? How can I have that experience? Persons are asking me, you know. Persons are, and even me myself, there is sometimes an almost euphoric, you're almost in this kind of, you feel this huge euphoria. It's difficult to explain it, but you just wake up feeling this euphoricness, and you feel very powerful, and you feel very light. You know, it's you almost wake up and say, oh, I'm not here again, you know, kind of thing. You'd rather be back there. And even though you don't know where there was, but it just felt so good. And it's not a physical good, it's like at a very soul based, cell based, that was just really nice, you know, to the point that you don't really want to wake up. But there is the transform, so you wake up with that experience, and it can only transform you for the positive, because no longer you just know that there's more, and it separates you to some extent from everybody else who are convinced that we are just these physical bodies and we're just going to kind of live life and then you die and that's it. But you know that more exists because you have been there. And if you're having these experiences regularly, there's no, it's not even about believing. It's not even about knowing. There is just, in the same way that the sun rises every day, you look in the sky, you see the moon, you just know that it's just part of the package, that there's more to this existence, you know. So, and that does shift you from a place of the everyday mundane stuff, you know, to the place of knowing that there's more. And then you have this added thing that there is supernatural stuff, metaphysical stuff going on around you during your wake state. Persons will often say that they feel like the entities are still there with them when they awake, when they're doing their thing, doing the chores, doing whatever you're doing. You get this sense that you are not alone, that something is there watching you, you know. And I think, as David has said as well, the onus should be on those who disbelieve to prove that it's not so. It shouldn't be for us to prove that it is so.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because we
Yeah.
are saying that it's happening. It should be for you to prove that it's not happening.
Yeah. I'm no longer in the business of trying to explain to thick boundaried people what it's like to be a thin boundaried person.
Yeah.
It's no longer.
Yeah, quite right, you know. And what I'm finding is that when you do that, you draw people to you because they want to understand more about it, you know, and they want to know more about it. And I have been experiencing people saying, as I said, you know, what do you do to have it? You know, why you and not me, kind of thing, you know. That's what I've been finding out.
That's an interesting element about what you were saying about that specialness, as someone feels almost chosen or more than because they have this extraordinary encounter. Even if it's horrifying at times, there seems to be like something energetically powerful about that. Like, oh, I'm in league with demons. This is cool.
Yeah. I think at the bottom, at the end of the day, you're saying that you know for real demons exist. You know, other people don't have that experience, but you do.
But and
You
I
know,
have to unpack the word demon, of course, because it's not, this is how my taboos came about. Because when I first had sleep paralysis, I was 14, and it was terrifying. It, a very classic case of being held down in a malevolent entity and extraordinary fear, and yeah, a sense that I was going to perish, right? So there was almost this death anxiety. It was very strong. And after it emerged, I told my mother about it, who is a spiritual person, but comes out of a Catholic tradition. And when I talked about it, I didn't know what word to use. And so, but in my, I think I probably used the word demon when I explained it. It felt like a demon was on me, and she got very tight-lipped and quiet. And in her mind, she's a psychological educator. I'm sure she was just like kind of running the numbers on like my own psychopathology and like, is this normal and all these kind of things. But she didn't know about sleep paralysis, of course. But it had a chilling effect, right? Like her own, I think, fear about it had a chilling effect, and there was no one else to really talk to. I remember talking to another confidant of mine at that age, who was my aunt, and who we would talk about spiritual experiences, and I would tell her about my sleep paralysis experiences, and I had the same effect. She would kind of get quiet and not, really want to explore it or move into it, as if, or even interpret it like it was a dream. Like it seemed like we were in a different territory that they were uncomfortable with. And so, of course, what happened, I didn't talk about it for another 10 years, right? It just went underground completely. And I feel that there must be so many people that's the story, right? There's so many people right now, and especially I'd say teenagers, right? And adolescents, because it emerges in adolescent usually. If it emerges early, it happens then. And they're having this transformative experience that the world is more than it seems, everything that you were just speaking of, that there's this extra layer to reality. And it's beyond knowing, it's beyond believing, it's experience, and yet no way to talk about it without being doubted or sanity being doubted. And that's where we're at.
yeah, that's very, very sad. Especially for the young people. And I know that children also experience sleep paralysis as well, and it must be very difficult for them if they don't have the support structures around them to help them through the experiences. That's very, very sad. And I guess that's to some extent why we do the work that we're doing, to shift the narrative, to kind of open it up so that people can speak about and share their experiences, to remove the stigma, because I know I felt very stigmatized. I thought someone had put a curse on me. I really, I was convinced, someone had put a curse on me, that the devil was following me, that there was a movie, I think it called The Entity or something, where there was the lady and she would move house and this spirit would follow her from house to house. And I thought I was that person, and so I kept it to myself. And then I think I did tell one work colleague, and it was like I had the plague. I mean, they didn't want to be around me anymore. And so it was like I had something that was contagious. So I kept it to myself. I didn't share it, and it took many, many years. And in fact, it's only in the past 2 or 3 years that I found out that my dad has been having it. And yeah, and it only came out because my mom said, your dad kept me up all night again, you know, she said, with his moaning and stuff in his sleep. And then I said, he's moaning in his sleep, Mum. And then we had a conversation. I had to call him to the room, and he said how they were trying to get him and he was trying to fight them. I said, them, Dad? What are you? My dad was in his late 70s. Dad, who are them? He said, oh, they always come. They come all the time, you know, in his sleep, and he fights them, and they get him and they hold him down. That's what he said.
Oh my gosh.
And I knew exactly what he was talking about, but that was how he termed it. And of course, I know through my work that sleep paralysis has a genetic tendency to it. It does run in families as well. So when he said that, I thought, you know, why didn't I know about this? Why has it taken all these years for me to know about this? You know, and it's because I didn't say anything about it, and nor did they, because of the stigma and their you know, my heritage, it's Jamaican, very Christian, and it's all about the devil and demons and things like that. And so we keep it quiet. We don't say anything about it, you know. So we're doing this work, and I know I am determined to kind of leave some kind of legacy around opening up the narrative, changing the narrative, shifting thought, shifting kind of our understanding. I'm at the place where I think it's very much energy based, in terms of universal energy, low-lying spirits, low-lying negative energy, interdimensional. Definitely interdimensional stuff is going on here. And with that comes the extraterrestrial argument and discussion. That's where I'm at with it.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's talk about this, because this is fascinating, and I don't even know where to go. But I have read some of Jeffrey Kripal wrote a book with the author of Communion, Whitley Strieber. What was it called? It may be called the Supernatural, but 2 words. And they go back and forth in. So Whitley Strieber, right, is the guy who started kind of the quote unquote alien craze in the 1980s with his book Communion, in which he had these encounters. And when you read the encounter, it's like, oh, this is happening in sleep, and there's paralysis involved. And then he goes on an otherworldly journey. And so it has the narrative arc that we see in sleep paralysis and all kinds of literature from around the world. And of course, he takes them seriously, and he has other phenomenal experiences too. When he's awake, he has other kinds of experiences. And so people try to minimize it as sleep paralysis. But what's interesting about Whitley Strieber is that in this book, which is not even 10 years old, he's looking back at these experiences, and he says, I never said that they were quote unquote aliens. I just that they were other. And I often think that this one creature that comes back to me again and again feels like the energetic life of, or energetic side to my own wife, my terrestrial wife. It's like her sexual essence as well as her energetic just essence. And sometimes it's delightful and sometimes it's terrifying. He says, but there's something else that's of course going on that's beyond that. That's like the gateway. That's a connection in. And it's so easy to get pigeonholed when you're talking about this stuff. It's either this or it's that. And so I get lost very quickly. And I'd love to hear your perspective on this interdimensionality.
I do know that Rudolf Steiner, I don't know if you've read any of his work. He's done a lot of, he's Austrian, he's passed away now. And he did work in the 1940s or so, but his books are available on Amazon, and there is a website that has got a lot of his material on it. But he sees it as a gateway. the entities are there, the beasts are there to see how worthy you are to pass through. So you have to be strong enough spiritually, energetically, to overcome the entities. And once you can overcome them, then you enter this realm where there are all of these gifts that are available to you, you know. And that's and I don't know if I'd agree 100% with it, but there's something in that for me. We do know that the similarities between an abductee, a UFO, an alien or an abductee of extraterrestrials, the similarities are very, very similar. We do know that the abductees will also talk about sleep paralysis, that they experience that as part of the abduction stage as well, you know. So and if you if I try and explain my thinking. So if we think that there's more in the universe in terms of living beings, whether that be humanoid, whether that be the greys that we see, whether that be beings that can communicate telepathically, beings that may not even have bodies, you know, they may just be energetically based. My thinking is that if that's the case, could it not be that they can move interdimensionally in a way that we can't, that they could engage with us in our sleep state? Yeah. So, and also, if we also think that we are not just physical, we are energetic beings, which we do know that we are energetic. We know that we are more than physical. Well, I'm sure of that. Then is it not also possible that when we sleep, we are in this energetic state that can also traverse interdimensionally? And then what can also come into play is persons who have passed on and transcended. They are also in this energetic state. And so they are also able to traverse dimensions and engage with us and other beings energetically. So I think once you kind of broaden your scope and where you're thinking, you then start to see the linkages. And I apologize, it's getting dark behind me. I need to get up and turn on the light, but I'm so kind of engaged in this conversation. But yeah, I'll get up in a moment. But yeah, that's where the whole thing comes full circle, when you start to see us as being more than just this physical being, and you also see the universe as something really broad that can encompass a wide range of entities that can communicate in different ways, you know. And that's where the abduction theory completely makes sense, completely. And persons will say that they experience sleep paralysis as part of the abduction that they went through.
Wow.
Now, I have no evidence and I have no data to support that. That's just from my experiences, because I sometimes wake up feeling like I've been somewhere else, you know. And sometimes in my sleep I live out days. I'll do the washing up, the chores, I'll do different things, visit people, and I've been sleeping for a few hours, you know. So the things that can happen when we sleep are tremendous. We know very little about that, you know. It's just, we just know the tip of the iceberg as far as that's concerned. And also in terms of what happens with us non-physically when we sleep.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so yeah, you lifted the conversation into a realm that is so little talked about. And for instance, when we just look at sleep paralysis from a clinical perspective, uh, they, the researchers will say, well, you can use cognitive behavioral therapy to get out of the experience and then wake up quickly, and then you're fine. You're fine. And it's like, hold on. There's interdimensionality here. We're talking about multiple universes here. We're talking about ancestors, angels, aliens.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to just like make it go away. I want to know how to navigate it. I want to be safe. I want to learn how to be in the space and not feel compromised and feel courageous. And that's, for me, I'm still learning. Like, I'm not a master at this. I mean, I'm nearly 50 years old and I still get scared when I have sleep paralysis. I have kind of I have a way, I have a method that helps me lift into out of body or other kinds of things, but I still have to go through it every single time. I
Yeah.
start off low, and then if I can stay in it, other things can happen.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And as you said, there is this kind of devaluing of the experience, isn't it? Where it's kind of reduced down to almost nothing, to almost, oh, it's your imagination working here, you know. But I just want to kind of hold up the torch for as long as possible for those that know that there is more going on here, you know, that this was an experience. I went through this, you know, don't tell me I didn't. Don't tell me it was my imagination or I'm stressed out or whatever it might be, you know, because I believe, and as I said, it goes beyond belief, that it's a real experience in the same way that I'm here speaking to you all now. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. And I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking it might be a good time to open up for questions or comments and discussion for the folks in the room. And so if you have a question for Sheila, or just want to comment on your own experience, or even just share your own experience, I want to open that space. And it's a small group, so you can just unmute yourself and take a moment and share.
I'll go. Can you hear me?
I
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Sheila. My mind is just going, and I'm loving this conversation. Ryan, I think we need a part two. Uh, just letting you know, because I've been talking a lot about sleep paralysis lately. A lot of people are reaching out to me about it, and I've experienced it myself. So a lot of the things you say 100% resonates with me. I don't even know where to start with you, because this was so exciting. um for me, I was sharing with somebody the other day that I was coming up with all of these different things, and I was like, just because in my own experiences with, out of body experience and astral travel, I can feel when my subtle body is separating from myself in those initial moments. And there's a part of me that actually, this is just a thing, but that I thought I'd throw out to you. Whereas I feel like, we really are, we're this physical manifestation of, the polarity of the world, right? We live in light and dark, right? We live in all of these dualistic concepts. So inherently, I feel like, we also embody that within our energetic layers. And so to me, it's like when that subtle body is moving, that even for me could be, a layer that is already existing within me, right? I am light and dark. So that is something that I feel, because we all have this collective shared experience, right? So yes, I love what you said about the catch-all aspect of it, because I think that is a point of frustration for a lot of people, being reduced, their experience being reduced, to just, the sleep paralysis, but not actually addressing the feelings that we commonly actually have, which is the feeling, that foreboding, that anxiety, that malevolent feeling that happens. So thank you for actually saying that. Was like, Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think, in terms of questions that I've been, and I've thrown this out at Ryan as well, which is I've had both hypnagogic and hypnopompic sleep paralysis. And I'm wondering if you have noticed a difference in the experience for people in either or in comparison with either.
So for me, and I also have issues with those two terms, the hypnagogic and hypnopomic, and I understand where they came from, but because I experienced sleep paralysis so erratically and so often, and it was whenever, wherever, it was really difficult for me to categorize into, was I just waking up? Had I just fallen asleep? How long have I been? It was so constant and so frequent that I can't break down my sleep paralysis episodes into those two categories. For me also, I had the added issue that I was afraid to sleep. And there are times even now that sometimes I think now isn't a good time to sleep. I do my studies and I try and do them during the day. Having this talk, in fact, it's okay because it's around 5 o'clock now for me, but I have to kind of wait. And this is another thing in terms of the impact that sleep paralysis can have on your life, because I don't want to take that energy with me into my sleep state, but it was because I was avoiding sleep. I wouldn't sleep for days. I would fall asleep at odd times in odd places. I remember going to the bathroom, to the loo, the ladies' toilet at work, and it was a quiet one on the top floor. And I said, let me just have 5 minutes here, thinking I'd be okay, only to have an episode. It would come as soon as I fell asleep, and you can feel it come in. For me, the temperature perhaps would change. My feet would go cold and the coldness would be rising up my body. I would know that it's coming, but I'm so tired and I couldn't wake myself up, and then it would happen and I would wake up out of it and I'm still in the loo thinking, I've only been here for a few minutes on this seat because I wanted a little nap. And it's happened. So it's difficult for me to answer that question, because for me, there was no boundary.
Do you see from a lot of the people that you've spoken to from your research, do people generally have it more as they are falling asleep?
I would say I know that it's difficult for me to say because I didn't ask that specific question of persons, in terms of when it was happening. I know that persons the waking up in the early hours of the morning, the 3 o'clock hours, was common because people would often relate that back to me, But a lot of the people that I've also spoken to, they were like me. I've spoken to a lot of chronic experiencers. And I think we can become very tired people because we're just not getting as much sleep as we should be getting, really. And that is kind of like, because we're not getting, from the medical perspective, because we're not getting enough sleep, when we do sleep, it's likely that we'll have an episode because we're not sleep healthy in that way, So what we need to do is address our sleep hygiene, and then we will be healthier during the sleep state. That's the medical argument to it. And again, I'm not sure that I agree with that, totally. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think, thanks. I think Marlo had her hand raised.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing with us. I actually I'm annoyed by my own question because it seems so simple after going the places you took us. And that is just like to clarify the language, because sometimes, I hear, and even I in the past have, had experiences like had an afternoon nap and can't move my body, but without anything more than this sense of like, I'm awake and I can't lift my limbs. Just as there's some like terminology for that separate from sleep paralysis. Or is there some definitions of these different things that people are terming sleep paralysis?
No. I think it's a catch-all. I think that persons are saying that they've had sleep paralysis, but even with what you've experienced, persons will say that that was sleep paralysis, or they'll say, I had sleep paralysis without the scary bit. That I've heard as well, people saying that. So for me, there is definitely something about the terminology. I think that we have moved on from the word sleep paralysis. So we need to create something new in terms of our language and the way how we refer to these experiences. And that's definitely something also that's coming out of the research that I've been doing, that the language, it's almost so the language hasn't moved on with our understanding of the experience, Yeah.
Is there any phrase that's standing out to you as
I really do. Nothing has come to me as yet. And I want to be the person that creates this new language, this new word, So any ideas you have, just put them my way and I'll think of something, because I want to put it in my research. I want to say that this is what we should be referring to now and move on from sleep paralysis. That's what I want to do.
Yes. Oh, I applaud that. I mean, that's it. We need the shift. The only person I know who's attempted that is Jorge Canisa Sevilla, whose book is Wrestling with Ghosts. And it's an incredible book. I think it came out in 2007 or 2008. And he uses the term bound lucidity. And I find that to be interesting because he's moving it into the lucid dreaming space, basically, with that term. But he has the sort of the full spectrum view of the potentials and the possibilities of sleep paralysis. He talks about malevolent creatures. He talks about ancestors. He talks about time travel. He talks about otherworldly visitations. Like he's sort of seen and heard it all. and so, but for me, bound lucidity doesn't do it either. It doesn't, because we're focusing on what isn't there. And where does the term for, right? What is happening?
That's right. I keep saying that something will come to me that can capture exactly what's going on in a very everyday language way. We don't want something jargonized, and something very straightforward that we can all connect with in terms of the experience. And that, as I said, has come up in my research in terms of the language that's being used and the confusion, because it's now creating a confusion in terms of, did I have sleep paralysis or didn't I? Is that what you would call sleep paralysis? It's causing some confusion now. So we really do need to move on and create some new terminology for it.
Mm. Yeah, well, that can be the subject of part 2 of this conversation that I really think we should have at some point. I'm looking at the time. It's top of the hour, and I want to respect everyone's time and say thank you, Sheila. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom, and just the brilliance in sharing your research. I can't wait for your book to come out. I know that it will happen. I just know it.
Yeah.
And can you tell us how to find you on the web? And
I do have a website, but I think the best place is through Sheila Pryce Brooks .substack.com, because I've got a Substack platform and I send out stuff quite regularly there. And from there you can access my email and social media and website and things like that. And I'm quite accessible as well on Substack, and other platforms, as you know, Instagram and stuff like that. So it's Sheila Pryce Brooks.substack.com.
Great. Great. Thanks. And I just have to notice it's been really cool to watch this liminal moment of the sun come down where you're at and enter into the darkness, you know, as you honor the liminality of the state is just so poetic.
Oh, that's lovely. I don't feel so guilty now.
See, I turned it around.
Wonderful. We can do that. We can do that.
Well, thanks again. And yeah, we'll be in touch. And I'll put your links and stuff into the show notes, and we'll make sure that all that gets reported. So thanks again for your time, and
Awesome.
have a great day. Sleep well, dream big.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Good night.